The pistol shot shattered the evening calm of Carson City, Nevada, and Olivia Carmichael knew she had seconds before the entire saloon turned against her. She had not fired the weapon, but the smoking gun lay at her feet, and the banker sprawled across the poker table with a red stain spreading across his white shirt. Before anyone could grab her, she bolted through the back door into the dusty street, her heart hammering against her ribs as shouts erupted behind her. It was September of 1878, and this was the third town in as many weeks where violence had followed her like a shadow. Olivia had no idea why someone wanted her framed for murder, but the pattern was becoming sickeningly clear. Every time she thought she had found safety, every time she started to breathe easier, another body appeared and she found herself holding the weapon or standing over the corpse. The law did not care about her protests of innocence. A woman alone in the West was already suspicious, and a woman connected to 3 murders was a monster in their eyes. She ran toward the livery stable where her mare was boarded, her skirts tangled around her ankles as she stumbled through the darkening streets. Behind her, voices rose in anger, and the sound of boots pounding dirt grew louder. She had maybe 30 seconds before they organized a proper pursuit, and 30 seconds was not nearly enough time to saddle a horse and escape. A strong hand grabbed her arm and yanked her sideways into a narrow alley between 2 buildings. Olivia opened her mouth to scream, but another hand clamped over her lips as she was pulled back into the shadows. Her captor smelled of leather and horses and something clean like sage, and his grip was iron firm but not painful. "Quiet," a low voice said near her ear. "You want to hang tonight, or you want to live?" Olivia went still, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. The hand slowly lifted from her mouth, and she turned to see a man watching her with sharp gray eyes beneath the brim of a worn Stetson. He was tall and rangy, with broad shoulders and a face that looked carved from the same sandstone as the nearby mountains. A star glinted on his vest, and her stomach dropped. "You are a lawman," she whispered, despair flooding through her. "Deputy Marshal," he confirmed, but he did not draw his gun or call out to the mob now streaming past the alley entrance. "Xander Quinn. And you are Olivia Carmichael, wanted for murder in 3 territories." "I did not kill anyone," she said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "I swear to you I have been framed. Someone is setting me up, making it look like I committed these crimes, but I am innocent." Xander studied her face for a long moment, and she could not read what he saw there. The shouts were fading now as the search moved toward the outskirts of town, but they would double back soon enough. Every second she stood here brought her closer to a noose. "I know," he said finally, and her knees nearly buckled with relief. "I have been tracking you for 2 weeks, watching the pattern. You are telling the truth. Then why did you grab me? Why not just let me go?" "Because running makes you look guilty, and every bounty hunter between here and California is looking for you now. That poster says $500, dead or alive. You would not make it 10 miles before someone put a bullet in your back." He glanced toward the street, then back at her. "You want to clear your name, or you want to spend the rest of your life running?" Olivia felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. "I want the truth. I want whoever is doing this to face justice. Then you are going to have to trust me." Xander released her arm and stepped back slightly, giving her space. "I have a horse 2 streets over and a cabin in the hills about an hour from here. No one knows about it except me. You can hide there while I investigate, figure out who is really behind these murders." "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." Something flickered in his gray eyes, an emotion she could not quite name. "I know innocent when I see it, and I took an oath to uphold the law, not to let innocent people hang because it is convenient." He held out his hand. "You coming, or are you going to take your chances with that mob?" She looked at his outstretched palm, calloused and strong, then back at his face. There was something steady about him, something that made her want to believe despite every instinct screaming that trusting anyone right now was madness. But what choice did she have? He was right about the bounty hunters, right about how running would only make things worse. Olivia placed her hand in his, and his fingers closed around hers with surprising gentleness. "I am trusting you with my life," she said quietly. "I know." Xander led her deeper into the alley, away from the main street. "Stay close and stay quiet. We move fast and we do not stop until we reach the cabin." They navigated through the back ways of Carson City, avoiding the main thoroughfares where torches now blazed as search parties organized. Xander moved with the confidence of someone who knew every shadow, every shortcut, and Olivia struggled to keep up in her long skirts and worn boots. Her lungs burned and her legs ached, but she did not complain. Freedom and breath were better than a rope and a quick drop. They reached a small stable where a tall black gelding waited, already saddled as if Xander had anticipated this exact scenario. He swung up into the saddle with easy grace, then extended his arm down to her. Olivia grasped his forearm and let him pull her up behind him, settling awkwardly on the horse's rump with her arms around his waist. "Hold on," he said. And then they were moving, the gelding's powerful stride eating up the distance as they left Carson City behind. Olivia pressed her face against Xander's back, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt, and tried not to think about what would happen if he was wrong, if he could not prove her innocence, if the real killer struck again while she hid in the mountains. The ride took longer than an hour because Xander took a winding route through the foothills, doubling back several times to obscure their trail. The moon rose full and bright, painting the Nevada landscape in shades of silver and shadow. Olivia had grown up in these mountains, knew them like she knew her own heartbeat, and yet tonight they felt foreign and threatening. Finally, they climbed a steep path through a stand of juniper and emerged into a small clearing. A cabin sat nestled against the hillside, small but sturdy with a covered porch and shuttered windows. A creek burbled somewhere nearby, and the air smelled of pine and clean stone. Xander dismounted and helped her down, his hands steady on her waist. "Welcome to the only place in Nevada where you are safe right now," he said. "It is not much, but it is hidden." Olivia looked around, taking in the isolation, the quiet, the sheer vulnerability of being alone in the wilderness with a man she did not know. But when she met his eyes, she saw only concern and determination. "Thank you," she said, and meant it, "for believing me, for helping me. Do not thank me yet." Xander led the gelding toward a small lean-to that served as a stable. "We have a lot of work ahead of us, and it is not going to be easy. Whoever is framing you has been careful, methodical. They knew where you would be, how to make it look like you were guilty. That takes planning and resources." "I have been trying to figure out the connection," Olivia said, following him. The 3 victims, they were all wealthy men. A mine owner in Virginia City, a cattle baron in Reno, and now a banker in Carson City. But I had never met any of them before the day they died. Xander unsaddled the gelding and began rubbing him down with practiced efficiency. "What about enemies? Anyone who might want to hurt you badly enough to ruin your life?" Olivia wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the mild evening. "My father died 6 months ago. He owned a small ranch outside of Empire City, left it to me in his will. I sold it because I could not run it alone, took the money and started traveling, trying to figure out what to do with my life." She paused, remembering. "There was a man who wanted to buy the ranch, made my father several offers before he died. He was angry when I sold to someone else, said I would regret it. but angry enough to frame me for murder. That seems excessive. People have killed for less in this territory." Xander finished with the horse and turned to face her fully. "What was his name?" "Thomas Brennan. He owns half the land between here and Virginia City, wanted our ranch because it has water rights to Silver Creek." Xander's expression grew thoughtful. "Brennan. I have heard that name. He has political ambitions, wants to be territorial governor. A man like that would not want his hands dirty with murder, but he would have the money to hire someone to do it for him." "But why frame me? Why not just kill me and be done with it?" "Because killing you would not get him the water rights. But if you hang for murder, your assets would be seized, sold at auction. He could buy them for a fraction of their worth, and no one would question it." Xander moved toward the cabin, pulling a key from his pocket. "It is a theory, anyway. We will need proof." Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. A single room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs and shelves lined with supplies. Xander lit a lamp and the warm glow pushed back the darkness. "You take the bed," he said. "I will sleep on the floor." "I cannot ask you to do that." "You did not ask. I offered." He pulled blankets from a trunk and began making a pallet near the fireplace. "We should both get some rest. Tomorrow I will ride into Empire City, see what I can find out about Brennan and whether there is any connection between him and the murder victims." Olivia sank down onto the edge of the bed, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. "What if you are wrong? What if it is not Brennan? What if we never find out who is doing this?" Xander paused in his work and looked at her, really looked at her, and she felt the weight of his gaze all the way to her bones. "Then we keep looking until we do. I do not give up on people, Olivia, especially innocent ones." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in the quiet certainty of his voice. But she had been running for so long, had been afraid for so long, that hope felt like a luxury she could not afford. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked softly. "You could collect that bounty yourself, claim you caught me. $500 is a lot of money." Xander's jaw tightened. "I had a sister once. She was accused of stealing from the family she worked for, said she took a brooch worth $50. She did not do it, but no one believed her. She was just a servant girl and the family was rich and respected." He turned away, but not before she saw the pain flash across his face. "They sent her to prison. She died there of fever 6 months later. She was 19 years old. Xander, I am so sorry. Her name was Margaret." He finished arranging the blankets and straightened. "So when I see someone being railroaded, when I see the law being used as a weapon instead of a shield, I do not walk away. I cannot." Olivia felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire now crackling in the hearthstone. This man, this stranger, was risking everything to help her, and not for money or glory, but because of a promise he had made to a dead sister. "She would be proud of you," Olivia said quietly. Xander met her eyes across the small room. "I hope so." They settled in for the night, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. Olivia lay on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling while her mind raced through everything that had happened, everything that might still happen. Across the room, she could hear Xander's steady breathing and found it oddly comforting to not be alone. Sleep came in fitful waves, and when dawn light finally crept through the shutters, she woke to find Xander already up, coffee brewing on the stove and breakfast laid out on the table. He looked like he had not slept at all, but his eyes were alert and focused. "Eat," he said, pushing a plate of bacon and cornbread toward her. "You will need your strength." Olivia sat and forced herself to eat, though her stomach was in knots. "When will you leave for Empire City?" "Within the hour. I should be back before dark." He poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed her one. "While I am gone, stay inside. Do not go near the windows, do not light a fire during the day, and if anyone comes up that path, you hide in the root cellar behind the cabin. Understood? Understood." She sipped the coffee, strong and bitter and exactly what she needed. "What will you tell people? How will you explain asking questions about Brennan?" "I will say I am investigating the murders, which is true. I will say I am following leads, which is also true. People talk to lawmen, especially when they think it will help catch a killer." He sat across from her, his hands wrapped around his own cup. "The trick is getting them to tell me things they do not realize are important. You have done this before. Enough times." He studied her over the rim of his cup. "Tell me about yourself, Olivia, not about the murders or the running, but about you. Who were you before all this started?" The question surprised her. "Why does that matter?" "Because I need to know who I am protecting. And because if we are going to spend time together in close quarters, I would rather know the woman I am sharing a cabin with." Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks and looked down at her coffee. "There is not much to tell. I grew up on my father's ranch, learned to ride and rope and shoot. My mother died when I was 12, so it was just me and my father after that. He taught me everything he knew about ranching, about surviving out here. I always thought I would take over the ranch when he got older, but then he got sick and everything happened so fast. You must miss him." "Every day." Her throat tightened with grief that was still fresh and raw. "He was a good man. Honest, hardworking. He taught me to always tell the truth, to stand up for what was right even when it was hard. And now here I am, accused of the worst crimes imaginable, and he is not here to help me through it." Xander reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The touch was brief, professional, but it sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with fear or grief. "He would be proud of how strong you have been. Running takes courage, especially when you know you have done nothing wrong." Olivia looked up and found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was handsome in a rugged, weathered way, with lines around his eyes that spoke of too much sun and too many hard years. But it was the kindness in his gaze, the unwavering belief, that truly drew her. "I am not as strong as you think," she admitted. "I am terrified, Xander. Terrified they will catch me. Terrified I will hang for crimes I did not commit. Terrified that even if we find the truth, no one will believe it." "Then be terrified," he said simply. "Fear is not weakness. It is proof you understand what is at stake, but do not let it paralyze you. We will find the truth, Olivia. I promise you that." She wanted to believe him, wanted to hold onto that promise like a lifeline. Instead, she squeezed his hand once and then pulled away, afraid of how much comfort she was already drawing from this stranger who had appeared in her darkest hour. Xander left an hour later, after giving her detailed instructions about staying hidden and safe. Olivia watched from the window as he rode down the mountain, his figure growing smaller until he disappeared into the trees. Then she was alone with nothing but her thoughts and the oppressive silence of the cabin. The day stretched endlessly. She tried to keep busy, tidying the already clean cabin, checking supplies, even attempting to read from the small collection of books Xander kept on a shelf. But her mind kept wandering to what he might be discovering, whether he was safe, whether anyone suspected he was helping her. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Olivia was pacing the cabin like a caged animal. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. She had positioned herself near the window, watching the path, when she finally saw movement in the fading light. Xander emerged from the tree line, but he was not alone. Two men rode behind him, and even from this distance, Olivia could see they were armed. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she backed away from the window, looking frantically for the root cellar entrance Xander had shown her. But before she could move, she heard Xander's voice, loud and clear, carrying across the clearing. "I appreciate you men riding out here with me, but as you can see, there is nothing suspicious about my cabin. Just a place I use when I am hunting." Olivia froze, understanding flooding through her. He was warning her, letting her know these men were not a threat, but that she needed to stay hidden. She crept to the side of the window and peered out carefully. The two men with Xander looked like ranch hands, rough around the edges but not particularly dangerous. They were surveying the cabin with mild interest while Xander dismounted. "Brennan wanted us to check on you," one of them said. "Said you were asking a lot of questions in town about him and his business dealings. Made him nervous." "I am investigating 3 murders," Xander said easily, his tone casual. "Brennan's name came up in connection with one of the victims. I would be a poor lawman if I did not follow every lead. Brennan is an important man. You go accusing him of anything, and you will find yourself out of a job real quick." Xander's smile was cold. "Good thing I am not accusing anyone of anything yet. Just gathering facts." He moved toward the cabin door, effectively blocking their view inside. "Now, if you gentlemen are satisfied that I am not harboring fugitives or plotting against your boss, I would appreciate some privacy. It has been a long day." The men exchanged glances, clearly uncertain whether they had accomplished their mission. Finally, the first one shrugged. "Just be careful where you point your questions, Marshal. Brennan has a lot of friends in high places." Duly noted. Olivia watched them ride away, her pulse still racing. When they were finally out of sight, Xander slipped inside the cabin and immediately checked the windows, making sure they were truly gone. "Are you all right?" he asked, turning to her. "I am fine." "Who were they?" "Brennan's men." "I rattled his cage today, and he responded exactly the way I expected. Sent his hired muscle to remind me who has the power in this territory." Xander pulled off his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. "Which tells me we are on the right track. Innocent men do not send thugs to intimidate lawmen. What did you find out?" Xander moved to the table and pulled out a small notebook, flipping through pages covered in neat handwriting. "Thomas Brennan is a very ambitious and very dangerous man. He owns property all over Nevada, has his fingers in mining, ranching, banking, and politics. He wants to be governor, and he has the money and connections to make it happen." "What about the murder victims?" "That is where it gets interesting. The mine owner in Virginia City. He owned a claim that Brennan wanted. The cattle baron in Reno. He controlled water rights that Brennan needed. And the banker in Carson City. He refused to give Brennan a loan for his political campaign, said Brennan's finances were not as solid as they appeared." Olivia sank into a chair, the pieces finally coming together. "So all 3 men stood in Brennan's way somehow." "Exactly. And your father's ranch with its water rights to Silver Creek was another obstacle. But unlike the others, Brennan could not just kill you and take what he wanted. The property had already been sold, so he needed a different approach. Frame me for murders and seize my assets when I hang." Olivia felt sick. "But I sold the ranch. I do not have the water rights anymore." "No, but the man you sold to, he died 2 weeks ago, fell off his horse, they said." "Broke his neck." Xander's expression was grim. "His widow is already getting offers on the property. Want to guess who is making the highest bid?" "Brennan." "Brennan." Xander closed the notebook. "He is cleaning up loose ends, Olivia, and you are the biggest loose end of all. As long as you are alive and talking, you are a threat to his entire plan. So what do we do? Even if we know it is him, how do we prove it? He is too smart to get his own hands dirty. We find the man he hired to do the actual killing, the one who has been setting you up. We get him to confess, to turn on Brennan in exchange for a lighter sentence." Xander met her eyes. "And I think I know who it is." "Who?" There is a man named Pike Sullivan, a hired gun who has been working in the territory for about a year. He has a reputation for being smart, careful, and completely without conscience. Several people mentioned seeing him in town around the time of each murder, but no one thought anything of it because he was not obviously connected to the victims. And you think Brennan hired him to kill those men and frame me? I think it is worth investigating. Sullivan stays at a boarding house in Virginia City when he is not working. I am going to ride out there tomorrow, see if I can find any evidence connecting him to Brennan or the murders. Olivia stood and moved to the window, looking out at the darkening mountains. This is never going to end, is it? Even if we prove Brennan is behind everything, he will just use his money and power to escape justice. Men like him always do. She felt Xander come up behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not touching. Not always, he said quietly. Sometimes the truth wins. Sometimes justice prevails. You have to believe that, Olivia, or there is no point in fighting. She turned to face him, and the closeness made her breath catch. In the dim light, his features were softer, less severe, and she could see the weariness in his eyes, the weight of the promise he had made to her. "Why do you believe in me so much?" she asked. "You barely know me. I know enough." His voice was rough, almost tender. "I know you are brave and scared and trying to do the right thing. I know you could have run a dozen times by now, could have disappeared into Mexico or California, but you stayed because you want the truth. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. I am not brave. I am just desperate. Bravery is not the absence of fear, Olivia. It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear." He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You are one of the bravest people I have ever met." The touch was gentle, almost reverent, and Olivia felt something crack open inside her chest. She had been alone for so long, carrying the weight of fear and grief and injustice by herself, that having someone believe in her, fight for her, felt almost overwhelming. "Xander," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. He seemed to understand anyway. His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, and then he was leaning down and she was rising up, and their lips met in a kiss that was soft and searching and full of unspoken promises. Olivia's hands found his shoulders, gripping the worn fabric of his shirt as the kiss deepened. He tasted like coffee and something uniquely him, and she felt safe for the first time in weeks, held in his strong arms as the world fell away. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Xander rested his forehead against hers. "I should not have done that," he said, but he did not sound sorry. "Why not?" "Because you are vulnerable right now, and I am supposed to be protecting you. Taking advantage of that is not right." Olivia pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. "You are not taking advantage of anything." "I kissed you back, Xander. I wanted that kiss. I wanted you." His eyes darkened with an emotion she could not quite name. "This is complicated. If anyone finds out I am hiding you, I will lose my badge, probably end up in prison for aiding a fugitive. And you deserve better than a lawman who is risking everything on a hunch." "You are risking everything to save my life," Olivia corrected. "That is not a small thing. That is not something I take lightly." She took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I know the timing is terrible. I know we barely know each other. But I feel something when I am with you, something I have never felt before. And if there is one thing this nightmare has taught me, it is that life is too short and too uncertain to pretend feelings do not exist." Xander looked at their joined hands, then back at her face. "What happens when this is over? When your name is cleared and Brennan is behind bars? What then?" "I do not know," she admitted, "but I would like to find out together." He squeezed her hand, and she saw the conflict in his expression, the war between duty and desire. "We clear your name first," he said finally. "We get justice for those murdered men and we put Brennan away. Then we figure out what this is between us. Deal, deal." They ate a late dinner of beans and cornbread, the conversation easier now that the air had been cleared between them. Xander told her about growing up in Missouri, about how he had become a lawman after Margaret's death, driven by a need to make the system work the way it was supposed to. Olivia shared stories about her father, about learning to rope cattle and break horses, about the dreams she had once had for the ranch. As night deepened, they prepared for sleep again. But this time, when Olivia lay down on the bed, Xander did not immediately retreat to his pallet by the fire. He sat on the edge of the mattress, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "I am glad I found you," he said quietly. "Even though this is dangerous and complicated and probably going to end badly, I am glad our paths crossed." Olivia rolled onto her side to face him. "It is not going to end badly. You are going to find Pike Sullivan, and he is going to confess, and Brennan is going to pay for what he did. And then you and I are going to figure out what comes next. You have a lot of faith in me. You have a lot of faith in me. It seems only fair to return the favor." He leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her throat tighten with emotion. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." Xander left before dawn, while the sky was still more black than blue. Olivia woke to find a note on the table, his handwriting strong and clear. "Stay hidden. Stay safe. I will be back by nightfall, trust me." She did trust him, which was either the smartest or most foolish thing she had ever done. Olivia spent the day trying to stay occupied, but her mind kept drifting to Xander riding into Virginia City, asking questions, getting closer to a dangerous man who killed for money. What if something went wrong? What if Pike Sullivan realized Xander was on to him? What if Brennan sent more men? The sun crawled across the sky with agonizing slowness. Olivia checked the path every few minutes, straining for any sign of Xander's return. By the time afternoon shadows began to stretch across the clearing, her nerves were frayed to breaking. That was when she heard the gunshots. They came from down the mountain, sharp cracks that echoed off the hills. Olivia's blood turned to ice as she counted. 3 shots, a pause, then 2 more. Either Xander was in trouble or someone else had found the cabin. She grabbed the rifle Xander had left for her, checked that it was loaded, and positioned herself by the door. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide in the root cellar like he had instructed. But what if Xander needed help? What if he was wounded or surrounded? The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, coming fast. Olivia raised the rifle, her palms slick with sweat, and waited. When the door burst open, she nearly pulled the trigger before recognizing Xander's face, pale and strained. "We have to go," he said, already moving to gather supplies. "Now." "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Sullivan is dead. Brennan's men killed him before I could get him to talk, and they know I am working against Brennan, which means they will come for both of us." He shoved clothes and food into saddlebags with frantic efficiency. "We have maybe an hour before they track us here. We need to be long gone by then." Olivia's mind reeled. Where do we go? If Brennan controls the whole territory, where is safe? We head for California. Cross the border, find a federal marshal who is not on Brennan's payroll. It is a long shot, but it is the only shot we have. He paused long enough to look at her. "I am sorry, Olivia. I promised to clear your name, and instead I just made everything worse. You tried. That is more than anyone else has done." She moved to help him pack, her hands steadier than she felt. "How did they know you were going after Sullivan?" "Someone must have told Brennan I was asking about him in Virginia City. He probably figured out what I was planning and decided to eliminate the evidence." Xander's jaw tightened with anger and frustration. Sullivan took 3 bullets to the chest, dead before he hit the ground. The men who did it rode off before I could get to them, but I recognized one of them from Brennan's ranch. So now we have nothing. No proof, no witness, no way to clear my name. Xander stopped packing and crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. We have each other, we have the truth, and we have a chance as long as we keep moving. He kissed her hard and fast. I am not giving up on you, Olivia. Not now, not ever. They saddled Xander's gelding and another horse he had stashed in the lean-to, a sturdy mare with kind eyes. Within 20 minutes, they were riding down the mountain, taking a different path than the one Xander usually used. The horses moved carefully over the rocky terrain, and Olivia kept glancing back, expecting to see pursuers at any moment. They rode through the night, stopping only to rest the horses and grab a few hours of sleep. Xander pushed them hard, navigating by starlight and instinct through country that grew increasingly barren and hostile. By dawn, they were deep in the desert, surrounded by sage and sand and endless sky. We will follow the Truckee River west, Xander said as they paused to water the horses at a small creek. It will take us across the border into California. From there, we head for Sacramento. The federal marshal there is an old friend. If anyone can help us, it is him. How long will it take? 4, maybe 5 days if we push hard and avoid the main roads. He handed her a canteen and she drank gratefully, the water cool and clean. I know it is a long journey, especially when you are exhausted and scared, but we can do this, Olivia. We can make it. She wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. What if we get to Sacramento and the marshal does not believe us? What if Brennan's influence reaches that far? Then we keep going. Oregon, Washington, wherever we need to go to find justice. Xander's expression was fierce. I told you I do not give up, and I especially do not give up on the people I care about. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Olivia met his eyes and saw the truth there, raw and undeniable. He cared about her, maybe more than cared, and the realization sent a rush of warmth through her chest. I care about you too, she said quietly. More than I probably should, given the circumstances. There are no rules for this kind of situation. Xander moved closer, his hand finding hers. We are making it up as we go, trying to survive and do the right thing and maybe find something good in the middle of all this chaos. Olivia stood on her toes and kissed him, pouring every ounce of gratitude and hope and growing love into the gesture. He responded in kind, his arms coming around her and pulling her close as the kiss deepened into something hungry and desperate. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Xander rested his forehead against hers. When this is over, he said roughly, when you are safe and free and your name is cleared, I am going to court you properly. Flowers and dinners and long rides under the stars, all the things you deserve. I do not need flowers, Olivia whispered. I just need you. They rode on, following the river as it cut through the desert landscape. The days blurred together in a haze of heat and dust and constant vigilance. They saw other travelers occasionally, but Xander steered them away from any contact, unwilling to risk being recognized or reported. On the 3rd night, they made camp in a small canyon sheltered from the wind. Xander built a tiny fire, just enough to heat some beans and coffee, while Olivia tended to the horses. The stars overhead were brilliant, undimmed by any town lights, and the silence was almost peaceful. Tell me about Margaret, Olivia said as they ate. What was she like? Xander was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. She was kind. That is the first thing everyone noticed about her. She could not walk past a stray dog or a hungry child without trying to help. She used to sneak food from our kitchen to give to the poor families in town, drove our mother crazy. She sounds wonderful. She was. Smart, too, She loved to read, wanted to be a teacher someday. But our family did not have money for that kind of education, so she went into service instead. His voice grew thick with old grief. The family she worked for accused her of stealing because they did not want to admit their own son had taken the brooch and sold it for gambling money. It was easier to blame the servant girl. Olivia reached out and took his hand. "You have carried that guilt for a long time. She was my little sister. I should have protected her, should have found a way to prove her innocence. Instead, I watched them drag her away and I did nothing. You were young. What could you have done more than I did?" He squeezed her hand. "That is why I became a lawman, so I could be the person Margaret needed but never had. So I could make sure the system worked for everyone, not just the rich and powerful." "You are honoring her memory every day," Olivia said softly. "Every time you stand up for someone who cannot stand up for themselves, every time you risk everything for the truth, you are proving that her death meant something." Xander looked at her, and the emotion in his eyes nearly undid her. "How did you get to be so wise?" "I am not wise. I am just trying to make sense of a senseless world." She shifted closer to him, needing the warmth and comfort of his presence. "Do you think we will make it to Sacramento?" "I know we will. I have not come this far to lose you now." That night, they slept curled together under a single blanket, sharing warmth and finding comfort in proximity. Olivia felt Xander's heartbeat steady and strong against her back, and for the first time in weeks, she slept deeply and without nightmares. They crossed into California on the fourth day, the landscape gradually shifting from desert to foothills as they climbed into the Sierra Nevada. The air was cooler here, scented with pine and granite, and Olivia felt a small measure of hope unfurling in her chest. "We are almost there," Xander said as they paused to rest the horses on a ridge overlooking a valley. "Sacramento is just 2 more days' ride. We stay off the main roads, avoid towns, and we will make it." But fate, it seemed, had other plans. They were crossing a narrow pass through the mountains when Olivia heard the distinctive sound of a rifle being cocked. She and Xander both froze as 3 men stepped out from behind rocks, their weapons trained on the couple. "Well, well," one of them said, a nasty smile spreading across his weathered face. "Olivia Carmichael and her pet Marshal. Mr. Brennan is going to be real pleased when we bring you both back." Xander's hand moved slowly toward his gun, but the lead bounty hunter shook his head. "I would not do that if I were you, lawman. We have orders to bring the woman back alive, but you are just a nuisance. No one would care if you disappeared in these mountains." "How much is Brennan paying you?" Xander asked, his voice calm despite the guns pointed at them. "Enough. More than you could afford, that is for sure." The bounty hunter gestured with his rifle. "Now both of you, nice and slow, get off those horses and put your hands where I can see them." Olivia's mind raced, searching for options, for any way out of this situation. They were outnumbered and outgunned, trapped in a narrow pass with nowhere to run. But she was not going to give up, not after coming so far. As they dismounted, Olivia caught Xander's eye and saw him give the smallest nod toward the left, where the rocks were piled highest. He had a plan, she realized, something desperate and probably dangerous, but better than surrendering. Everything happened fast. Xander suddenly shoved her toward the rocks while drawing his gun in one smooth motion. The pass erupted with gunfire, bullets ricocheting off stone as Olivia scrambled for cover. She heard Xander return fire, heard someone cry out in pain, and then she was pulling her own pistol and shooting at the nearest bounty hunter. The fight was brutal and chaotic. Olivia had learned to shoot on her father's ranch, but shooting at targets was very different from shooting at men trying to kill you. Her hands shook and her aim was poor, but she kept firing, giving Xander the cover he needed to take down the second bounty hunter. The third man, realizing he was outmatched, turned and ran back down the pass. Xander started after him, but Olivia called out, "Let him go. We need to move before more come." Xander hesitated, then nodded. They quickly checked the two downed bounty hunters, confirming they were no longer a threat, then mounted their horses and rode hard in the opposite direction. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest, and her hands would not stop shaking, the reality of what had just happened crashing over her. "Are you hurt?" Xander asked as soon as they had put some distance between themselves and the ambush site. "No, scared but not hurt." She looked at him, searching for injuries. "What about you?" "I am fine." "That was too close, Olivia, too damned close." His jaw was tight with anger and fear. "Brennan is not giving up. He is throwing more men at us, and eventually we are going to run out of luck. So what do? We change tactics. No more running, no more hiding. We go straight to Sacramento, ride through the night if we have to, and we get to Marshal Garrett before Brennan can send anyone else after us." They pushed the horses to their limits, riding through the afternoon and into the evening as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. The mountains gradually gave way to rolling hills and then flat valley land, and in the distance, Olivia could see the lights of Sacramento glowing against the darkening sky. They reached the city just after midnight, the streets mostly empty except for a few drunks and late-night revelers. Xander led them directly to a small house on the outskirts of town, a tidy place with a white picket fence and roses growing in the front yard. He dismounted and pounded on the door, urgent but not panicked. After a long moment, a light appeared in the window and the door opened to reveal a middle-aged man in a nightshirt, holding a lamp in one hand and a pistol in the other. "Xander Quinn," the man said, surprise and concern crossing his face. "What in God's name are you doing here at this hour?" "I need your help, Marcus, more than I have ever needed anything." Xander glanced back at Olivia, still mounted on her horse. "This is Olivia Carmichael. She is wanted for murders she did not commit, framed by a man named Thomas Brennan who has half of Nevada in his pocket. I need you to hear us out, look at the evidence, and help us bring him to justice." Marshal Marcus Garrett studied them both for a long moment, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Then he stepped back and opened the door wider. "You better come inside and tell me everything." They spent the next 2 hours laying out the entire story for Garrett, from the first murder in Virginia City to the ambush in the mountain pass. Xander provided all his notes and observations, while Olivia filled in details about her father's ranch and Brennan's attempts to buy it. Garrett listened without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer with each revelation. "Thomas Brennan," he said finally, sitting back in his chair. "I have heard of him. Ambitious, ruthless, with political aspirations. If what you are telling me is true, he is one of the most dangerous men in the territory." "It is true," Xander said firmly. "Every word. I staked my career and my life on it." Garrett looked at Olivia. "And you, Miss Carmichael, you swear you are innocent of these murders?" "I swear it on my father's grave," Olivia said, meeting his eyes without flinching. "I have never hurt anyone in my life. I am a victim of Brennan's ambition, nothing more." The marshal nodded slowly. "The problem is proof. Without Sullivan's testimony, without hard evidence linking Brennan to the murders or the frame-up, it is going to be difficult to bring charges against a man of his standing." "So what do? Xander asked. "We cannot just let him get away with this." "No, we cannot." Garrett stood and began pacing the room. "But we need to be smart about it. Brennan will expect you to go to the authorities, will have already started spreading his version of events. We need something that cannot be disputed, something that proves beyond doubt what he has done." "Like what?" "Like financial records showing payments to Sullivan. Like witnesses who can place Brennan and Sullivan together. like evidence that Brennan benefited from each of the murders. Garrett turned to face them. I have contacts in Nevada, people who are not on Brennan's payroll. Give me 3 days to make some inquiries, to dig into Brennan's finances and business dealings. If the proof is there, I will find it. Olivia felt a surge of hope. You believe us? I believe Xander Quinn is one of the most honest lawmen I have ever met. And I believe that where there is smoke, there is usually fire. Brennan has been operating with impunity for too long. It is time someone held him accountable. Garrett's expression softened. In the meantime, you both need rest. There is a room upstairs you can use. Get some sleep, and we will start fresh in the morning. Xander and Olivia followed Garrett upstairs to a small but comfortable guest room. As soon as the door closed behind them, Olivia felt the adrenaline that had been sustaining her drain away, leaving her shaky and exhausted. We made it, she said, hardly daring to believe it. We actually made it. Xander pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. You were incredible today. The way you handled yourself in that ambush, the way you have held up through all of this. I am in awe of you, Olivia Carmichael. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent and letting herself feel safe for the first time in so long. I could not have done any of this without you. You saved my life, Xander, more than once, and you gave me a reason to be the lawman I always wanted to be. He pulled back enough to look at her, his gray eyes warm in the lamplight. When this is over, when Brennan is behind bars and your name is cleared, I want to build a life with you. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other for a short time, but I have never been more certain of anything. Olivia's heart swelled with an emotion so big she could hardly contain it. I want that too, a life with you, a future together, whatever that looks like, wherever it takes us. Xander cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. Olivia melted into him, her hands sliding up his chest to link behind his neck. The kiss went on, speaking of things they could not yet say aloud, of love and hope and a future they were both desperately fighting for. When they finally pulled apart, Xander rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Olivia. I know it is crazy and we are in the middle of a nightmare, but I love you. Tears pricked her eyes, but they were happy tears. I love you too, Xander Quinn. I think I have loved you since the moment you pulled me into that alley and believed me when no one else would. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, fully clothed on top of the blankets, too exhausted and too grateful for proximity to care about propriety. For the first time in weeks, Olivia slept without fear, safe in Xander's arms and protected by the walls of Marshal Garrett's house. The next 3 days were a strange limbo of waiting and hoping. Garrett sent telegrams, received responses, and disappeared for hours at a time to meet with his contacts. Xander and Olivia stayed in the house, hidden from curious eyes, and tried to remain patient. They talked about everything during those long hours. Xander shared stories of his years as a lawman, the cases he had solved and the ones that still haunted him. Olivia told him about her dreams for the future, about maybe buying another ranch someday, about raising horses and children in equal measure. How many children? Xander asked with a smile as they sat in the garden on the 3rd afternoon. At least 3, maybe 4. I always wanted a big family, people around the table at every meal. She looked at him shyly. Is that too many? That sounds perfect. He took her hand, threading their fingers together. I can see it now. A ranch somewhere in California, maybe up in the foothills. Good land for horses, a house big enough for all those children. You and me building something together. You would give up being a marshal for you, for a life with you, in a heartbeat. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. I became a lawman to honor Margaret, to make sure the system worked. but I have learned something these past few weeks. Sometimes justice does not come from a badge. Sometimes it comes from standing up for what is right. Consequences be damned." Before Olivia could respond, Garrett appeared in the garden doorway, his expression serious but not grim. "I found it," he said without preamble, "the proof we needed." They followed him inside to his study, where papers were spread across the desk in organized chaos. Garrett pointed to a ledger, his finger tracing specific entries. Payments from Brennan to Pike Sullivan, disguised as consulting fees but made on the exact dates of each murder. Bank records showing Brennan purchased the properties connected to all 3 victims within weeks of their deaths, well below market value. And a witness, a clerk in Brennan's office, who is willing to testify that Brennan ordered him to prepare documents seizing your assets after your arrest, Miss Carmichael. Olivia could hardly breathe. "You found all of this in 3 days." "I had help from some very motivated people who have been waiting for an excuse to take Brennan down. He has made a lot of enemies over the years with his ruthless business practices. They were happy to cooperate." Garrett's smile was sharp. "I have sent all of this to the territorial governor with a formal request for an investigation. I also sent copies to 3 different newspapers, just to make sure Brennan cannot bury it." "So what happens now?" Xander asked. "Now we wait for the governor to act. Given the evidence and the publicity, he will not have a choice. Brennan will be arrested, tried, and if justice prevails, convicted." Garrett looked at Olivia. "And you, Miss Carmichael, will be exonerated. The charges against you will be dropped, your name cleared." Olivia felt tears stream down her face, relief and gratitude overwhelming her. Thank you so much. Thank Xander. He is the one who believed in you when everyone else saw only a murderess." Garrett clasped Xander's shoulder. "You did good work, Quinn. Margaret would be proud." Xander's throat worked with emotion. "I hope so." The territorial governor acted with surprising speed. Within a week, Thomas Brennan was arrested at his ranch outside of Empire City, charged with conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and a dozen other crimes. The newspapers ran story after story about his fall from grace, the ambitious man who had tried to murder his way to power. Olivia's charges were formally dropped, and a public apology was issued for the wrongful accusations. She and Xander traveled back to Nevada to testify at the preliminary hearings, facing Brennan across a courtroom as he glared at them with impotent fury. The trial itself took 2 months, but the verdict was never really in doubt. The evidence was overwhelming, the witnesses credible, and Brennan's defense crumbled under the weight of his own greed. He was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life in prison. On the day the verdict was read, Olivia and Xander stood on the courthouse steps, the autumn sun warm on their faces. She felt lighter than she had in months, as if a tremendous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "It is over," she said, hardly daring to believe it. "It is really over." "It is over," Xander confirmed. He turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "Which means we can start the next chapter, together." Olivia smiled up at him, her heart full to bursting. "What did you have in mind?" "Well, first, I was thinking I would like to marry you." "If you will have me, that is." "Xander Quinn, are you proposing to me on the courthouse steps?" "I am. I know it is not very romantic, and I do not have a ring yet, but I have been carrying this question around for weeks, and I cannot wait another minute." He dropped to one knee right there in front of God and half the town. "Olivia Carmichael, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, raise those children we talked about, and let me spend every day proving how much I love you?" Olivia did not hesitate. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He stood and swept her into his arms, kissing her as the crowd around them erupted in cheers and applause. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at once, Olivia saw the future stretching out before them, bright and full of possibility. They were married 3 weeks later in a small church in Sacramento, with Marshal Garrett standing as Xander's best man and the wife of the minister serving as Olivia's attendant. It was a simple ceremony, nothing fancy or elaborate, but it was perfect because they were together. Xander had resigned his position as deputy marshal, deciding that he had spent enough years chasing criminals and not enough living his own life. With the money Olivia had from selling her father's ranch and Xander's savings, they purchased a beautiful piece of property in the foothills east of Sacramento. The land had a creek running through it, good grass for horses, and enough space to build the life they had dreamed about. They spent the winter building their house, working side by side to raise walls and frame windows. It was hard work, exhausting and sometimes frustrating, but Olivia had never been happier. Every nail she hammered, every board she helped lift into place, was a piece of their future taking shape. Spring brought the first foals from the horses they had purchased, leggy and curious creatures that made Olivia laugh with delight. Xander proved to be a natural rancher, patient with the animals and tireless in his work. They fell into an easy rhythm, up with the sun and working until dark, then falling into bed exhausted and content. One evening in late May, exactly a year after that fateful night in Carson City, Olivia stood on the porch of their completed house and looked out over their land. The sun was setting in a blaze of gold and crimson, painting the hills in shades of fire. She heard Xander's footsteps behind her, and then his arms came around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice warm against her ear. "About how much has changed. A year ago I was running for my life, terrified and alone, and now I have all of this. A home, a husband I love more than anything, a future I never thought I would get to have." "We have all of this," Xander corrected gently. "We built it together." Olivia turned in his arms to face him. "I have something to tell you, something wonderful." His eyes searched hers, hope and anticipation flickering across his features. "What is it?" "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Xander just stared at her, the words seeming to take a moment to sink in. Then his face split into the widest smile she had ever seen, and he lifted her off her feet, spinning her around as she laughed and clung to his shoulders. "A baby," he said, setting her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "We are going to be parents. Olivia, that is the best news I have ever heard. You are happy." Happy does not even begin to cover it. He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "You have given me everything, Olivia. A home, a purpose, and now a family. I did not know it was possible to be this happy." They stood there on the porch as the sun sank below the horizon, wrapped in each other's arms and dreaming of the future. The baby came in the winter, a healthy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determined chin. They named him Samuel, after Olivia's father, and he filled their house with noise and joy and endless wonder. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, fierce and beautiful with dark hair and a stubborn streak a mile wide. They named her Margaret, and Xander wept when he held her for the first time, overcome with gratitude that he could honor his sister's memory in such a perfect way. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch prospered, their horses gaining a reputation throughout California for being well-trained and sound. Samuel and Margaret grew like weeds, learning to ride almost before they could walk, and the house rang with laughter and love. On a warm summer evening when Samuel was 7 and Margaret was 5, Olivia stood in the same spot on the porch where Xander had proposed all those years ago. He came to stand beside her, his hair now touched with gray at the temples but his eyes still as sharp and loving as ever. "Do you ever think about those weeks on the run?" Olivia asked, watching the children play in the yard. "About how close we came to losing everything?" "Sometimes," Xander admitted, "but mostly I think about how grateful I am that I pulled you into that alley in Carson City. That I chose to believe in you when everyone else saw only a criminal. That choice, that moment, gave me the best life I could have imagined." Olivia leaned into him, feeling his steady warmth, his unwavering presence. "I love you, Xander Quinn. More today than yesterday and less than I will tomorrow." "I love you too, Olivia Quinn. Always have, always will." They stood there as the sun set over their ranch, over the life they had built from ashes and fear and impossible hope. The bounty on her head had brought trouble to every town, but it had also brought her to the cowboy who hunted the truth and found love instead. And in the end, that made every moment of terror and uncertainty worth it. Samuel called out from the yard, asking his father to come play, and Margaret was climbing the fence again despite being told not to. Xander kissed Olivia's temple and went to wrangle their children, his laughter floating back across the evening air. Olivia watched her family, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. She had lost so much, her father and her innocence and her faith in justice. But she had gained so much more, a partner who believed in her, children who filled her days with purpose. A home built on truth and love and hard-won peace. The Wild West could be brutal and unforgiving, but it could also be beautiful and full of second chances. Olivia had learned that lesson the hard way, running from false accusations and finding redemption in the arms of a lawman with a wounded heart and an unshakable sense of right and wrong. As darkness fell over the ranch and the stars began to emerge in the vast Nevada sky, Olivia sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. For Xander, who had risked everything to save her, for the truth that had finally prevailed, and for the life they had built together, one day and one choice at a time. Years continued to flow like the creek that ran through their property, steady and life-giving. The ranch expanded, and so did their family. Another son arrived when Margaret was 8, a quiet boy they named Daniel who loved books as much as horses. And then, when Olivia was 35 and certain they were done having children, twin girls appeared, surprising everyone and filling the house with even more chaos and joy. Xander proved to be an exceptional father, patient and loving but firm when needed. He taught Samuel to track and hunt, showed Margaret how to gentle a wild horse, read to Daniel by the fire, and braided the twins' hair every morning without complaint. Watching him with their children, Olivia fell in love with him all over again, deeper and truer with each passing year. They never forgot the darkness that had brought them together. On the anniversary of that night in Carson City, they would sit together on the porch after the children were asleep and remember. Remember the fear and the running, the gunshots and the desperate gamble that had paid off. Remember how close they had come to losing each other before they had ever really found one another. But mostly they looked forward, to the future they were building with their own hands. The ranch became known throughout the West as a place where people could buy honest horses from honest people. Travelers would stop by and stay for supper, sharing news and stories, and the Quinn family became pillars of their small community. Olivia never took a single day for granted. Every morning when she woke up next to Xander, every evening when they gathered the children for supper, every quiet moment stolen between the chaos of raising 5 kids and running a ranch, she gave thanks. For the second chance she had been given, for the man who had believed in her, for the life that had grown from the ashes of injustice. Marshal Garrett visited often, watching the children grow and shaking his head in wonder at how much joy could spring from such dark beginnings. He had become like family, an honorary uncle who spoiled the children and traded stories with Xander late into the night. On one such visit, when Samuel was 15 and already as tall as his father, Garrett pulled Olivia aside. "You know, I have been a lawman for 30 years. I have seen a lot of cases, a lot of criminals and victims, but I have never seen anything quite like what you and Xander pulled off. Against all odds, against a powerful man with unlimited resources, you won. You got justice and you got each other. That is something special." Olivia smiled, looking over at where Xander was teaching Margaret how to break a new colt. "We got lucky. If you had not believed us, if you had not found that evidence, everything would have turned out very differently. It was not luck. It was courage and love and refusing to give up even when the world said you should." Garrett squeezed her shoulder. "You two are proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys really do win." Thomas Brennan died in prison 10 years after his conviction, bitter and broken and unmourned. When news of his death reached the ranch, Xander and Olivia stood together in silence, processing the end of the man who had tried so hard to destroy them. "You feel relief?" Xander asked. "Closure." Olivia considered the question. "I feel sad that he wasted his life on greed and ambition, that he hurt so many people and destroyed so much in pursuit of power. But I also feel grateful that he failed, that his darkness did not win." "His darkness gave us our light," Xander said quietly. "If he had not framed you, I never would have found you. We never would have had this life, these children, this love. I know. And I would not trade any of it, not for anything." She leaned into him, solid and warm and forever hers. "But I still wish he had chosen a different path, that those men he killed were still alive, that his ambition had not cost so many people so much." They stood there in the fading light, honoring the dead and celebrating the life they had carved from tragedy. And then they went inside to their children, to the noise and warmth and beautiful chaos of the family they had created. Samuel grew into a fine young man, steady and reliable like his father. He took over more and more of the ranch work, showing a natural talent for horse training and business management. Margaret became a force of nature, fearless and passionate, with a gift for healing injured animals that bordered on miraculous. Daniel surprised everyone by announcing at 16 that he wanted to be a lawyer, to fight for justice the way his parents had fought for truth. The twins, identical in appearance but vastly different in personality, kept everyone on their toes with their schemes and adventures. Olivia and Xander watched their children grow with pride and wonder, marveling at how each one carried pieces of them but was wholly their own person. They had built more than a ranch, more than a house. They had built a legacy of love and integrity and standing up for what was right. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the children threw them a party. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, filling the ranch with music and laughter. There was dancing and food and stories that stretched late into the night. As the celebration wound down and the children herded the last guests toward their wagons, Xander took Olivia's hand and led her away from the house, back to that spot on the porch where so much of their story had unfolded. 20 years, he said, shaking his head in wonder. "It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "Best 20 years of my life," Olivia replied, lacing her fingers through his. "Though I will admit that first year was a bit rough." Xander laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Running from bounty hunters and hiding in mountain cabins. I thought that was romantic. You would." She turned to face him, reaching up to touch his face. The lines there were deeper now, carved by sun and laughter and 20 years of living fully. But his eyes were the same, still sharp and gray and looking at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. "Thank you, Xander." "For what?" "For believing me. For saving me. For loving me all these years and giving me a life more beautiful than anything I could have dreamed." "You saved me too," he said softly. "I was so lost before I found you, going through the motions but not really living. You gave me purpose and passion and a reason to be better than I was. Everything good in my life comes from you." They kissed there on the porch as they had countless times before, the touch familiar and comfortable and still capable of making Olivia's heart race. When they pulled apart, both smiling, the sound of their children's voices drifted from inside the house. "Mama, Papa, the twins are fighting again." "Some things never change," Olivia said with a laugh. "Thank God for that." Xander kept her hand in his as they walked back inside, back to the beautiful chaos of their life. Thank God for all of it. The years continued their steady march. Samuel married a rancher's daughter from the next county and gave them their first grandchild, a boy with Olivia's dark eyes and a smile that could light up a room. Margaret shocked everyone by falling in love with a Paiute medicine man and moving to the reservation to learn his healing arts. Daniel went east for law school and returned with a degree and a burning passion to defend the innocent. The twins eventually stopped fighting long enough to realize they were best friends, and they opened a dress shop in Sacramento that became wildly successful. They visited the ranch often, bringing fabric and laughter and stories of city life that fascinated their nephews and nieces. Olivia and Xander grew old together, their hair turning silver and their movements slower, but their love never dimming. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the land they had built together, and remember the terror and the running. Remember the moment their eyes first met in that Carson City alley. Remember the choice to trust, to believe, to love despite all the reasons not to. On a warm spring evening when Olivia was 62, she sat in her favorite chair on the porch with Xander beside her. Their children had all come home for Sunday supper, and the house behind them rang with the sound of grandchildren playing. Life was good and full and exactly what they had dreamed of all those years ago. "You have any regrets?" Xander asked, a question he posed every few years, always hoping the answer would be the same. Olivia pretended to think about it, letting him sweat for a moment before smiling. "Not a single one. You. Only that I did not find you sooner, that we did not get even more years together." "We still have time," Olivia said, squeezing his hand. "Plenty of time." And they did. They had years more of sunsets and grandchildren and quiet mornings drinking coffee while the ranch woke up around them. They had laughter and tears and everything in between. They had a love that had started in darkness and grown into brilliant light. When Olivia finally passed away at the age of 78, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and the man who had loved her for more than half a century, her last words were simple. "Best decision I ever made," she whispered, looking into Xander's tear-filled eyes. "Trusting you, loving you." "Best decision I ever made," he replied, holding her hand as he had held it through everything, "was pulling you into that alley and choosing to believe." She smiled, and then she was gone, slipping away as peacefully as falling asleep. Xander lived 2 more years, long enough to see another great-grandchild born, long enough to ensure the ranch was secure in Samuel's capable hands. And then, on a quiet morning in early fall, he joined his beloved Olivia, dying in his sleep with a smile on his face and her name on his lips. They were buried together on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a spreading oak tree they had planted on their first anniversary. The headstone was simple: Xander and Olivia Quinn, beloved parents, grandparents, and partners in everything. Their love story had started with a bounty and a desperate escape, but it ended with peace and family, and a legacy that would endure for generations. The ranch continued, passed down through Samuel and then his children. The story of how it was founded, of the cowboy who hid the accused woman and hunted the truth, became family legend. Every Quinn child grew up hearing about their brave ancestors, who had faced down injustice and won, who had built something beautiful from the ashes of fear. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun set just right, people claimed they could see two figures standing on the porch of the old house. A man and a woman, hand in hand, watching over the land and the family they had created. Some said it was just tricks of the light, shadows, and memory. But those who believed in love that transcended death, in bonds that could not be broken even by time, they knew better. Xander and Olivia had found each other in the darkest of circumstances and built a life of light. Their story was one of courage and hope, and the unshakable belief that truth and love would always prevail. It was a story that deserved to be remembered, to be told around fires and dinner tables, to inspire others facing their own darkness, because in the end, that was their greatest legacy. Not the ranch or the children or the years they had together, though all of those were precious. Their greatest legacy was proving that one person choosing to believe, one act of courage in the face of injustice, could change everything. A bounty on her head brought trouble to every town. But the cowboy who hid her and hunted the truth found something far more valuable than any reward. He found love, purpose, and a life worth living. And together, they showed the world that even in the wild, unforgiving West, happy endings were possible for those brave enough to fight for them. Their love story ended not with death but with triumph, with generations carrying their names and values forward, with a ranch that still stood proud against the California hills, with a family that knew the meaning of integrity and courage because two people had refused to give up on each other or on justice. And that, in the end, was the most perfect ending of all.